Two of the law enforcement officers who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, have sued today to block the nearly $1.8 billion fund established by Donald Trump to potentially pay off pardoned violent insurrectionists. In their brand new lawsuit, the officers say this, quote, "The fund endangers the lives and safety of plaintiffs Harry Dunn and Daniel Hodges, officers who defended the Capitol on January 6, 2021, in two ways. First, by its very existence, the fund encourages those who enacted violence in the president's name to continue to do so. Dunn and Hodges already face credible threats of death and violence on a regular basis. The fund substantially increases the danger. Second, if allowed to begin making payments, the fund will directly finance the violent operations of rioters, paramilitaries, and their supporters who threatened the plaintiffs' lives that day and continue to do so. Here's a little reminder of what happened that day and a reminder of the actions of the people who may soon be receiving a payout funded by our taxpayer dollars, as described by the officers who defended the U.S. Capitol and testified before the January 6th Select Committee.
I felt the bike rack come on top of my head, and I was pushed backwards, and my foot caught the stair behind me, and my chin hit the handrail, and then at that point I had blacked out, but the back of my head clipped the concrete stairs behind me.
I was grabbed, beaten, tased, all while being called a traitor to my country. I was at risk of being stripped of and killed with my own firearm, as I heard chants of kill him with his own gun. As I was swarmed by a violent mob, they ripped off my badge. They grabbed and stripped me of my radio. They seized ammunition that was secured to my body. They began to beat me with their fists and with what felt like hard metal objects.
I, too, was being crushed by the rioters. I could feel myself losing oxygen and recall thinking to myself, this is how I'm going to die.
Several attempted to knock me over and steal my baton. One latched onto my face and got his thumb in my right eye, attempting to gouge it out. I cried out in pain and managed to shake him off. Before any permanent damage was done. I was effectively defenseless and gradually sustaining injury from the increasing pressure of the mob. Directly in front of me, a man seized the opportunity of my vulnerability, grabbed the front of my gas mask, and used it to beat my head against the door.
One woman in a pink MAGA shirt yelled, "You hear that, guys? This voted for Joe Biden." Then the crowd, perhaps around 20 people, joined in screaming, "Boo!" No one had ever called me a while wearing the uniform of a Capitol Police officer.
So the people who did that called Harry Dunn the N-word for the first time in his life while wearing a uniform of a Capitol Police officer. Those people who beat officers to within minutes of their lives, people who committed those brutal acts of violence that we all saw with our own eyes because it happened on live TV in broad daylight, those people, all of them who were pardoned, are now also eligible to be paid out with our money, taxpayer dollars. Officers Hodges and Dunn, who you saw in those clips and who filed the lawsuit today, put it this way in their lawsuit, quote, "Payments from the fund will be used to finance the operations of those who have threatened and tried to kill the plaintiffs." It's actually, for all the gaslighting that happens in Trump 2.0, these facts are things that J.D. Vance and Todd Blanche have refused to rule out in public comments they've made over the last 24 hours. Here's what J.D. Vance said.
You know who never, ever gets an ounce of sympathy when it comes to that disproportionate sentencing is people who voted for Donald Trump and participated in the January 6th protest.
That's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Brendan Ballou is here. He is representing Harry Dunn and Daniel Hodges in the lawsuit brought today to block Donald Trump's so-called anti-weaponization fund. He's also the founder of the Public Integrity Project and a former special counsel in the Department of Justice. Also joining us, Scott MacFarlane. He's the chief Washington correspondent for Midas Touch. He's done extensive investigative reporting in and around the Capitol insurrection, including the prosecutions, the event itself, the sentencing, the trials of the rioters, and everything that's happened since then. Brendan, first tell me about the lawsuit.
Yeah, so, this is an act of extraordinary presidential corruption, maybe the most in American history, but it's more than just corruption. As you were talking about, my clients, Danny Hodges and Harry Dunn, could have died on January 6th, but the threats didn't stop there. They have continued to receive credible death threats for years for speaking out about January 6th. And what could happen here is that the very people who threatened their lives on January 6th and beyond could suddenly be getting millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And what I want people to understand is that this is about more than just corruption. This is about encouraging and endorsing violence by people who are acting in the president's name, but fundamentally beyond the reach of the law. And if this fund is allowed to continue, if this is allowed to disperse money, what we will be doing in America for the first time since the KKK is financing paramilitary organizations in the United States, militias, insurrectionists who are willing to be violent for the president, but are not accountable to the law.
I want to bring into our coverage the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Robert Garcia of California. Congressman, thank you for being here. I want to play what your colleague, Congressman Jamie Raskin, said about this so-called weaponization fund at a hearing today.
Not a single J6er has had charges thrown out because of a false, malicious, or retaliatory prosecution. Not a single one has had their criminal conviction reversed on appeal because of a false, malicious, or retaliatory prosecution. The idea that they were falsely or maliciously prosecuted has not been found by a single judge, Republican, Democratic, or independent appointee. And this is a defamatory slur on law enforcement and the serious civil servants at the DOJ who have been under attack since this nightmare of MAGA weaponization began in January of last year. False, malicious, and retaliatory prosecutions are how Donald Trump and his DOJ operate, not real law enforcement, not real prosecutors.
It's an important, I think, alignment, right, of every judge, whether they were appointed by Democrats or Republicans, has upheld the convictions, the criminal convictions of the insurrectionists. Not one of them has found any one of them to be retaliatory or the result of a weaponized prosecution. What do you make of both the announcement of the fund and the lawsuit on behalf of officers to stop it?
I mean, first, let's be really clear. This fund is completely outrageous. It's complete corruption from the most corrupt president in the most corrupt administration in the history of our country. And this fund might be the most corrupt thing that the president has actually done, on top of the crypto funds, the real estate deals, selling access to the White House, the investment funds. The idea that you're going to take $1.8 billion that you negotiated yourself between your own government and then hand it out to criminals, to traitors, to election deniers, to Donald Trump's friends, for all we know, to himself, possibly. We have no idea what Donald Trump is thinking. We're hearing right now, I'm actually stunned at how many Republicans on the Hill are actually finally saying what the hell is going on. And I would hope that the Speaker, Mike Johnson, would actually have a backbone to denounce this fund. I support Jamie Raskin's efforts, and Oversight's also going to be involved in looking at who actually gets these funds and what corruption is actually happening there.
Say more about Republicans speaking out against the fund.
Look, I talked to some colleagues. I was in a committee earlier that were discussing it. Hopefully some of them will be a little bit louder in their comments, but you are hearing whether it's Representative Fitzpatrick and others coming out very clearly, Representative Kiley coming out and saying this is crazy. This is corruption. And I think we've got to hear more Republicans saying that. There shouldn't be an American on the ground anywhere in this country that should support what's happening. He is stealing your money. He is stealing our money directly from your pockets and putting it into his and into the pockets of his friends. And the complete lack of respect for law enforcement, to give a penny to the January 6ers, the people that invaded this Capitol, that attacked this Capitol, that tried to overthrow an election, just goes to show you the kind of man that Donald Trump is. He's a small, pathetic loser who has no business getting a dime to give to anybody.